Necklace by Guy de Maupassant. She was one of those pretty and charming girls who sometimes are born, as if by an error of fate, into a family of clerks. She had no dowry, no expectations, no way of being known, understood, loved, and married by any rich and distinguished man. So she let herself be married to a little clerk at the Ministry of Education. She dressed plainly because she had never been able to afford anything better, but she was unhappy as if she had really fallen from a higher station. Since with women, there is neither caste nor rank, for beauty, grace, and charm take the place of family and birth. Natural ingenuity, instinctive elegance, and a supple mind are their sole hierarchy, and often make the daughters of the commoners the equals of the very greatest ladies. Mathilde suffered ceaselessly, feeling herself born to enjoy all the delicacies and luxuries of life. She was distressed by the poorness of her house, by the bareness of the walls, and by the shabby chairs and the ugly curtains. All these things that another woman of her class would not even have noticed tortured her and made her angry. The sight of a little Breton girl who did her housework aroused in her despairing regrets and wild daydreams. She dreamed of silent antechambers, hung with oriental tapestry, lit by tall bronze candelabra, and of two big footmen in knee breeches who sleep in the huge armchairs, made drowsy by the oppressive heat of the stove. She dreamed of vast living rooms furnished with ancient silk, of the elegant cabinets containing priceless curiosities, and of the little perfumed reception rooms made for afternoon chats with close friends, with men famous and sought after, whom all women envy and desire. When she sat down to dinner at a round table covered with a 3-day-old cloth opposite her husband, who, lifting the lid of the soup, shouted excitedly,
"Ah, beef stew! What could be better?"
She dreamed of fine dinners, of shining silverware, of tapestries which peopled the walls with figures from another time, and strange birds in fairy forests. She dreamed of delicious dishes served on wonderful plates, of the whispered gallantries to which you listen with an inscrutable smile while you are eating the pink meat of a trout or the wings of a quail. She had no dresses, no jewels, nothing. And she loved nothing but those. She felt she was made for them. She wanted so much to be charming, to be envied, to be desired and sought after. She had a rich friend, a former schoolmate at the convent, whom she no longer wanted to visit because she suffered so much when she came home. For several days afterwards, she would weep with sorrow, regret, despair, and misery. But one evening, her husband reached home with a triumphant air, holding a large envelope in his hand.
"Look,"
he said.
"Here's something for you."
She tore the paper quickly and drew out a card which was printed these words: "The Minister of Education and Madame George Ramponneau request the honor of Monsieur and Madame Lascelles' company at the Ministry on Monday evening, January 18th. Instead of being delighted, as her husband had hoped, she threw the invitation on the table resentfully and muttered, "What do you want me to do with that?"
"But, my dear, I thought you would be glad. You never go out, and this is such a fine opportunity. I had great trouble getting it. Everyone wants to go. It is very exclusive, and they are not given many invitations to clerks. The whole ministry will be there."
She looked at him with an irritated glance and said impatiently, "And what do you expect me to wear if I go?" He had not thought of that. He stammered.
Why, the dress you go to the theater in, it looks very nice to me.
He stopped, stunned, seeing that his wife was crying. 2 great tears ran slowly from the corners of her eyes toward the corners of her mouth.
What's the matter? What's the matter?
He asked. With great effort, Madame Loisel overcame her grief and replied in a calm voice, while she wiped her wet cheeks. Nothing. Only I have no dress, so I can't go to this ball. Give your card to some colleague whose wife has better clothes than I do. He was in distraught, but tried again.
That's it, Mathilde. How much would it cost to make a suitable dress, which you could use on other occasions? Something very simple?
She thought for a moment, making her calculations and wondering also what amount she could ask for without an immediate refusal and an alarmed exclamation from the thrifty clerk. Finally, she replied hesitantly, I don't know exactly, but I think I could do it with 400 francs. Loisel grew a little pale, because he had been saving exactly that amount to buy a gun and treat himself to a hunting trip the following summer on the plain of Nantes with several friends who went lark shooting there on Sundays. But he said,
Very well, I'll give you 400 francs, and try to have a pretty dress.
The day of the ball drew near, and Madame Loisel seemed sad, uneasy, and anxious. However, her dress was ready. Her husband said to her one evening,
What's the matter? You have been acting strange in the last 3 days.
She replied, I'm upset that I have no jewels, not a single ornament to wear. I will look cheap. I would almost rather not go at all.
You could wear flowers, said her husband. They are very fashionable at this time of year. For 10 francs, you can get 2 or 3 magnificent roses.
She was not convinced. No, there's nothing more humiliating than to look poor among a lot of rich women. Her husband cried,
How silly you are! Go and see your friend Madame Forestier and ask her to lend you some jewels. You know her well enough to do that.
She uttered a cry of joy. Right, I never thought of that. The next day she went to her friend and told her about her distress. Madame Forestier went to a wardrobe with a mirror, took out a large jewel box, brought it back, opened it, and said to Madame Loisel, Choose, my dear. First she saw some bracelets, then a pearl necklace, then a gold Venetian cross set with precious stones of exquisite workmanship. She tried on the ornaments before the mirror, hesitated and could not make up her mind to part with them, to give them back. She kept asking, You have nothing else? Of course, look further. I don't know what you like, said Madame Forestier. Suddenly she discovered, in a black satin box, a superb diamond necklace, and her heart began to beat with uncontrolled desire. Her hands trembled as she took it. She fastened it around her neck, over her high-necked dress, and was lost in ecstasy at her reflection in a mirror. Then she asked, hesitating, filled with anxious doubt, Will you lend me this? Only this? Yes, of course, said Madame Forestier. She threw her arms around her friend's neck, embraced her passionately, then fled with her treasure. The day of the ball arrived. Madame Loisel was a great success. She was prettier than all the other women, elegant, graceful, smiling, and full of joy. All the men looked at her, asked her name, sought to be introduced. All the cabinet officials wanted to waltz with her. The minister himself noticed her. She danced with rapture, with passion, intoxicated by pleasure, forgetting everything in the triumph of her beauty, in the glory of her success, in a sort of cloud of happiness made up of all the respect and admiration of all these awakened desires, of that sense of triumph that is so sweet to a woman's heart. She left at about 4 o'clock in the morning. Her husband had been sleeping since midnight in the little deserted anteroom with 3 other gentlemen whose wives were having a good time. He threw over her shoulders the clothes he had brought for her to go outside in, the modest clothes of common life, the poverty of which contrasted with the elegance of the ball dress. She felt this and wanted to run away, so she wouldn't be noticed by the other women who were wrapping themselves in expensive furs. Lascelles held her back, saying,
"Wait a moment. You will catch a cold outside. I'll go get a cab."
But she did not listen to him and ran down the stairs. When they reached the street, they could not find a cab and began to look for one, shouting after the cabman passing at a distance. They went toward the Seine in despair, shivering with cold. At last they found on the quay one of those ancient nightcaps, which, as though they were ashamed to show their shabbiness during the day, are never seen in Paris until after dark. They were dropped off at their door in the Rue des Martyrs, and sadly walked up the steps to their apartment. All was ended for her, and he was remembering that he had to go to his office at 10 o'clock. In front of the mirror, she took off the clothes around her shoulders, taking a final look at herself in all her glory. But suddenly, she uttered a cry. She no longer had the necklace around her neck.
"What's the matter with you?"
asked her husband, already half undressed. She turned towards him, panic-stricken. I have lost Madame Frostier's necklace," she cried. He stood up, distraught.
"What? How? That's impossible."
They looked in the folds of her dress, in the folds of her cloak, in her pockets, everywhere, but they could not find it.
"Are you sure you still had it on when you left the ball?"
he asked. "Yes, I touched it in the hall at the ministry."
"But if you had lost it in the street, we would have heard it fall. It must be in the cab."
"Yes, probably. Did you take his number?"
"No. And you? Didn't you notice it?"
"No." They looked at each other, thunderstruck. At last, Lascelles put on his clothes again.
"I'm going back,"
he said.
"Over the whole route we walked. See if I can find it."
He left. She remained in her ball dress, without the strength to go to bed, sitting on a chair, with no fire and no thought. Her husband returned at about 7 o'clock. He had found nothing. He went to the police, to the newspapers to offer a reward, to the cab companies. Everywhere the tiniest glimmer of hope led him. Madame Lascelles waited all day in the same condition of mad fear before this terrible calamity. Lascelles returned at night with a hollow, pale face. He had found nothing. He said,
"You must write to your friend. Tell her that you have broken the clasp of her necklace, and that you're having it mended. It will give us more time."
She wrote as he dictated. A week later, they had lost all hope. Lascelles, who had aged 5 years, declared,
"We must consider how to replace that ornament."
The next day, they took the box which had held the necklace and went to the jeweler whose name they found inside. The jeweler consulted his books and said,
"Madame, It was not I who sold the necklace. I must simply have supplied the case.
Then they went from jeweler to jeweler, looking for a necklace like the other one, consulting their memories, both sick with grief and anguish. In the shop at the Palais Royal, they found a string of diamonds, which seemed to be exactly what they were looking for. It was worth 40,000 francs. They could have it for 36. So they begged the jeweler not to sell it for 3 days. And they made an arrangement that he should buy it back for 34,000 francs if the other necklace was found before the end of February. Loisel had 18,000 francs, which his father had left him. He would borrow the rest. And he did borrow, asking for 1,000 francs from one man, 500 from another, 5 louis here, 3 louis there. He gave notes, made ruinous agreements, dealt with usurers and every type of moneylender. He compromised the rest of his life, risked signing notes without knowing if he could ever honor them, and, terrified by the trouble still to come, by the black misery about to fall on him, by the prospect of all the physical privations and moral tortures that he was about to suffer, he went to get the new necklace and laid down on the jeweler's counter 36,000 francs. When Madame Loisel took back the necklace, Madame Frostier said to her with a chilly manner, "You should have returned it sooner. I might have needed it." She did not open the case, as Madame Loisel had so much feared. If she had detected the substitution, what would she have thought? What would she have said? Would she have taken Madame Loisel for a thief? From then on, Madame Loisel knew the horrible life of the needy, but she played her part heroically. The dreadful debt must be paid. She would pay it. They dismissed their maid, changed their lodgings, and rented a garret under the roof. She came to know what heavy housework meant and the odious labors of the kitchen. She washed the dishes, staining her dainty fingers and rosy nails on greasy pots and pans. She washed the soiled linen, the shirts, and the dishcloths, which she hung to dry on a line. She carried the garbage down to the street every morning and carried up the water, stopping for breath at every landing. And dressed like a commoner, she went to the fruiterer, the grocer, the butcher, with a basket on her arm, bargaining, insulted, defending her miserable money, sou by sou. Every month they had to pay some notes, renew others, get more time. Her husband worked every evening, doing accounts for a tradesman, and late at night he often copied manuscripts for 5 sous a page. This life lasted 10 years. At the end of 10 years, they had paid everything, with the rates of usury and the accumulations of the compound interest. Madame Loisel looked old now. She had become the woman of impoverished households, strong and hard and rough, with frowsy hair, skirts askew, and red hands. She talked loudly as she washed the floor with great swishes of water. But sometimes, when her husband was at the office, she sat down near the window and she thought of that evening at the ball so long ago, when she had been so beautiful and so admired. What would have happened if she had not lost that necklace? Who knows? Who knows? How strange and changeful life is. How little is needed to ruin or make you. One Sunday, as she was walking in the Champs-Élysées to refresh herself after the week's work, suddenly she saw a woman walking with a child. It was Madame Frostier, still young, still beautiful, still charming. Madame Loisel felt emotional. Should she speak to her? Yes, certainly. Now that she had paid, she would tell her all. Why not? She went up to her. Good day, Jeannie. The other, astonished to be familiarly addressed by this common woman, did not recognize her at all. She stammered, But, Madame, I don't know you. You must have made a mistake. No, I'm Mathilde Lascelles. Her friend uttered a cry. Oh, my poor Mathilde, how you have changed. Yes, I have had a pretty hard life since I last saw you, and many miseries, and all because of you. Because of me? How can that be? Do you remember that diamond necklace you allowed me to wear at the ball held by the ministry? Yes, well, I lost it. What do you mean? You brought it back? I brought you back another exactly like it, and it has taken us 10 years to pay for it. You can understand that it was not easy for us. We had nothing. At last it's over, and I'm very glad. Madame Frostier had stopped. You say that you bought a diamond necklace to replace mine? Yes, you didn't notice them. They were very similar. And she smiled with proud and innocent pleasure. Madame Frostier, deeply moved, took both of her hands. Oh, my poor Mathilde, my necklace was an imitation. It was worth only 500 francs at most.